biggest mistake that saved someone's life. One rainy night, Alex was driving through a deserted forest road. He'd taken a shortcut to save time, but he started to regret his decision as the storm grew stronger, making it almost impossible to see beyond a few feet. As lightning flashed, Alex spotted a narrow road on his left, barely visible under a canopy of twisted branches. His GPS was silent, as if it had given up on finding him a route. In a split-second decision, he turned down the narrow road, thinking it might lead him back to civilization faster. As he drove deeper, the road became narrower, and his headlights barely illuminated the thick woods surrounding him. Every few seconds, he thought he saw shadows moving between the trees. His heart raced, and he questioned his choice. But turning back seemed even scarier. Suddenly, his car hit a bump, and he lost control. His car swerved, narrowly missing a massive tree, and came to a stop. Shaking, he checked himself, no injuries, just a little shaken up. He looked around, realizing he was completely lost. That's when he noticed something strange. There was a faint glow coming from deep in the woods. Curiosity and fear wrestled within him, but he decided to investigate, thinking he might find help. As he walked through the thick trees, the glow grew brighter until he stumbled upon an abandoned cabin. Inside, he found a room full of strange symbols and maps that looked ancient. But the most disturbing thing was the stack of missing person posters plastered on the walls. Chillingly, some of them were recent. Then he heard a noise behind him, heavy breathing. He froze, heart pounding, and slowly turned around. But there was no one there, just an eerie silence. Panicked, he sprinted back to his car, his footsteps echoing in the dark forest. Just as he reached his car and was about to drive away, he glanced in the rearview mirror and saw a figure watching him from the shadows. He slammed on the gas and sped off, never looking back. The next day, he learned that a massive landslide had destroyed the main road he was originally on. Had he not taken that wrong turn, he might not have survived. That nightmarish turn he thought was a mistake had saved his life.
Story number 2.
Sarah was running late for her flight to Tokyo. She had planned this trip for months, meticulously organizing every last detail. It was meant to be a getaway, a time for adventure, and a chance to escape the monotony of her daily routine. But her morning had taken a turn for the worse, spiraling into chaos with a string of frustrating delays. It started with a spilled coffee that left a dark stain on her freshly ironed blouse. She had barely cleaned up the mess when her phone rang, a last-minute call from work that she couldn't ignore. By the time she finally reached the airport, her passport had somehow disappeared into the depths of her luggage, and she fumbled with her bags, searching frantically until she found it wedged between her travel guide and a pair of socks. Out of breath, Sarah raced to the check-in counter, her heart pounding as she glanced at the clock. She was only a few minutes late, but the gate was already closed. The attendant offered a sympathetic look but told her there was nothing they could do. Her plane would leave without her. As she sank into a chair in the terminal, a mixture of anger and frustration boiled inside her. She could hardly believe it. All that planning, all the excitement, and now she was stuck here watching her flight take off without her. She cursed herself for every little mistake that had led to this moment, convinced it was the worst luck she had in years. Lost in her thoughts, she barely noticed when someone sat down beside her. A strange man with a calm, almost eerie demeanor took the seat next to hers. His eyes seemed to serene, his gaze unwavering, as if he were observing her distress from a distance with an odd sense of detachment. He leaned toward her, an unsettling grin creeping across his face, and said quietly, "Everything happens for a reason." Startled, Sarah turned to look at him, but his words only made her feel more irritated. She brushed him off as another eccentric traveler and focused on her phone, trying to see if she could book a new flight. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw the man stand up and disappear into the crowd, as mysteriously as he had appeared. Within moments, she forgot about him entirely, focused instead on her frustration and her efforts to salvage her trip. Hours dragged by as she waited for her rescheduled flight. She tried to distract herself, scrolling through social media and replying to messages. But her thoughts kept drifting back to that missed opportunity. Just as she was about to grab a snack from a nearby cafe, her phone buzzed with a news alert. Absent-mindedly, she opened it and her heart stopped. The headline glared back at her. Her original flight to Tokyo had encountered severe turbulence over the Pacific Ocean, lost control, and made a crash landing in the middle of the ocean. The article detailed the terrifying moments leading up to the crash, the panic on board, and the frantic attempts by the flight crew to maintain order. The survival rate was slim, and rescue teams were still combing through the wreckage in search of survivors. Sarah's mind raced, her body frozen in shock. She could hardly believe what she was reading. The very plane she was supposed to be on was now at the bottom of the ocean. If not for those small delays of spilled coffee, a misplaced passport, she would have been on that flight, living through those harrowing moments, or worse, perhaps lost forever. The memory of the strange man's words echoed in her mind. Everything happens for a reason. She felt a shiver run down her spine as she remembered his unsettling grin, the eerie calmness in his voice. How had he known? Had he somehow foreseen this tragedy, or was it simply a chilling coincidence? She had dismissed him as just another eccentric stranger, but now his words felt haunting, almost prophetic. Sarah sat there, dazed and filled with an overwhelming mix of emotions. Gratitude and guilt churned within her, along with an indescribable feeling of awe. As though she'd been touched by something beyond her understanding, she couldn't shake the sensation that she'd been spared, that she'd been granted a second chance for reasons she would never fully comprehend. Over the following days, she would think back on this moment again and again, replaying every detail in her mind. She couldn't shake the memory of that man, his unsettling grin and his cryptic words. She never saw him again, and she would never know if he had been a figment of her imagination, a cosmic messenger, or merely a stranger with strange timing. But for the rest of her life, she would carry with her the knowledge that sometimes life's most frustrating moments turn out to be the very things that save us.
Story number 3.
Jake was in a rush to get to a friend's late-night party. He'd thrown on his jacket, grabbed his keys, and was halfway out the door when he realized he'd left his phone inside. He groaned, considering just going without it, but something nagged at him to turn back. After all, it was late, and he'd promised to check in with his family once he arrived. Begrudgingly, he went back inside, grabbed his phone, and headed out again, now running a few minutes behind schedule. As he drove through the empty streets, he tried to make up for lost time, pushing the speed limit slightly. The roads were deserted, and he figured it wouldn't hurt. But just as he approached a major intersection, he was forced to slow down. Flashing lights and police cars were blocking the road. A massive accident had taken place right at the spot he would have passed through if he hadn't gone back for his phone. Jake's pulse quickened as he took in the chaotic scene. Mangled cars were strewn across the intersection, and paramedics were working frantically. The wreck was so fresh he could smell the smoke and rubber in the air. It hit him suddenly: if he hadn't gone back for his phone, he might have been in that crash. He sat in his car, frozen, as his mind played through the alternate scenario. His car, in the middle of the pileup, crumpled and broken. The thought made his stomach turn. The urge to hurry and save a few minutes had nearly led him into a life-threatening situation. Shaken, Jake took a deep breath, grateful he'd turned back. As he resumed his drive, he moved slowly, no longer in a rush to reach the party. When he arrived, he greeted his friends with a smile, but the event felt surreal. Every so often, his gaze drifted to his phone, the small device that, by sheer chance, had saved him. From that night on, Jake thought differently about the little inconveniences and detours in life. He came to see them not as annoyances, but as possible protection. Small, inexplicable ways life sometimes kept him out of harm's way. And although he never shared the story, each time he looked at his phone, he was reminded of the night a forgotten phone had saved his life.